Todd Dunn here in Manset, Maine at the boatyard where I store Tortuga. Today I'm going to epoxy scarf the first plank end on to replace the bad wood I removed a couple of weeks ago. I've been a little bit delayed by this because we had a really bad storm here Sunday night into Monday of this week, which knocked out power to most of the island. And we just got power back here at the boatyard late last night. So today really is the first day where I could work here with power tools. So I'm going to get started and quickly epoxy scarf a plank end onto there. The first step is to take the plank end that I've cut, put the scarf in, and cut it to fit right there. I've already marked where I want to make my cut, and I'm going to use my oscillating saw to make this first cut. I'm using an oscillating saw for this cut simply because it gives me a very nice precise cut, and unlike a skill saw or a saber saw, it won't rip out any wood. So it'll make a nice clean, smooth cut. There we go. It's slower than another kind of saw, but it does make a nice cut and I can keep right on my line. And that's done. So the next step is to fit this and see if I have to do any shaping on the plank. Okay, I'm going to set the plank here in place and see how it is for length. And not too bad. However, I can see here that the plank, where I cut it to the same width all the way across just by ripping it on the table saw, it's a little too wide at the forward end and just right at the aft end. And also, it doesn't quite line up with my scarf here. So if I take a little bit off the bottom of the plank, I can pull it down and make it fit a little better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand plane some off the bottom of the plank right here. All right, I've clamped the plank up on this. I've clamped the plank up on this sawhorse. I've drawn a line on here that's on this side actually that I want to plane to. And I want to gradually taper it down. So I'm going to start by making a few passes on this end. I think this wood wants to be planed this way. I think I'm going to do better just holding it. Okay, that should have put some taper into it. Not bad. Test fit it. Still have a little bit to go. I've got her shaped pretty well now. She fits in there pretty snugly. I am going to have to carve a caulking bevel on the bottom of the plank, which is not a particularly big deal. Just take the plane and make a couple of passes on the edge. And right up here at the bow, I'll put a caulking bevel on this edge too, so that won't be much, just a few passes with the plane. Well, the bevels are on. You can see there's made that opening a little wider, which will allow me to put caulk in there and then seam putty. So the next step is to pre-drill this for the screws that are going to go in. So I'll mark it here at the center of that, mark that, and there. Put one, look where the, here, and one there. Up here, I'll put one here and one there. And that should pretty much do it. Back here, where the epoxy scarf joint will be, I'm going to clamp the top. I can get a clamp down in here. And down here, I'm just going to put a drywall screw in to draw the two pieces of wood together. So, the next step is to pre-drill the screw holes. Pre-drilling the screw holes is pretty straightforward. I've got a 3/16 inch bit here, which will allow clearance for the number 12 screws I'm going to use. I'll just drill through. Drill the back two. Now the next step is to countersink. So everything will be ready to go. I just happen to have a 1/2 inch countersink here. And countersink these. Making them deep enough that I can have room for my bung to fit in. Okay, at this point, I'm ready to do the actual installation. All that will remain once I get the epoxy on is to drill the lead holes for the screws. I just put the bit in there for that. And then I will clamp it up, put a single drywall screw through on the other end to hold the bottom of the scarf joint together, and then put the 4 screws in. So this will go very quickly. I've mixed a batch of epoxy up here, and what I'm going to do now is put a little bit of unthickened or neat epoxy on here. This is West System 105 with 205 hardener. Just put a little coat of that on. I'm using the high-tech spreader. Normally I would brush this on, but because this is a very small job, and a brush that you use for this, even if you use a chip brush, which is a throwaway brush, does cost money. So I prefer not to spend the money. So just put a little on the plank here. And I will get some squeeze out on the top of the plank below this scarf, but that will have to be, what I'll do is I will clean up that edge a little bit after the fact with my oscillating saw. So that's there. I'm just going to get a paper towel, clean this edge up a little. Then I will thicken the epoxy and make the actual scarf. Clean off the epoxy there. Now, I put that on now before I thicken the rest of the epoxy because I want to give it a little time to soak in. At this point, I've put the wood on, I've clamped it in place and put a drywall screw through down here to draw it down, draw it together, down at the bottom where the clamp wouldn't reach. I've set the wood screws in. I'm just going to do a little final torquing here. And they're snug up against the frames. And that's that. So what remains to do is once the epoxy's set, which I'm going to allow 2 days because it's relatively cold right now and it's taking a while for epoxy to set. So 2 days from now, I'll take this clamp off, pull this drywall screw, fill that hole. I'll put a drill into that hole a little bit, then fill it. Then I will bung the holes and caulk this seam down here at the bottom. I'm not going to do the forward edge until I get all 3 planks in. I can run continuous caulk right up there. Once the caulk is in, I'll putty the seams and let the putty cure, and this project will be ready for final fairing and painting. So probably 2 days from now, I'll put this one in maybe on Friday, and this one in maybe on Sunday, and then probably next week, Tuesday or so, I will come back and bung the holes and start caulking. I'll probably caulk before I bung, just because if I put the bungs in, if I don't let them cure, the hammering of caulking cotton into the seams could knock them out. So I'll probably caulk, then put the bungs in afterward. Once the bungs are in and set, I'll trim them, and we will then have this project ready for final sanding to fair everything in. It's pretty good now. A little tiny bit proud there, so I'll have to sand it there a little. Sand it back here. And once everything is sanded, I'll putty the seams. And after the putty cures for a while, I will come back and sand it again and then paint. I want to get 2 or 3 coats of paint on this fall, so that in the spring, when I put the final topsides paint on the boat for the year, I have a good base to work with. But right now, this plank is drawn down snug against the frame and the stem, and the scarf joint is tight enough, not too tight, so there's still plenty of epoxy in there to make the bond. In a couple days, these 2 planks here will essentially be one plank. Okay, thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed it. It's a pretty simple process. Anybody can do it with a little practice. And if you like this, give me a like. If you want to see more, you can subscribe to my channel. I'd appreciate it. And share it if you'd like. And I look forward to showing you the rest of this project as each stage progresses.